We are good to go, I guess. All right. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the council meeting of December 21st on a very chilly, perhaps almost a record chilly day in Sechelt. Council, we have our agenda in front of us. Are there any declarations of conflict to be aware of? And any amendments to the agenda? I have one. I think in view of I discussed with staff, in view of the length of our agenda, we'll pull item 10.2, the operations and engineering divisions capital update report. That's primarily for information, and we can certainly have it come back to our next meeting for questions. You're certainly welcome to read it in the meantime and absorb it and see all the good things we've been working on. So with that amendment, with your support, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Thank you, Councillor Toth. Second. Don't everybody jump at once. Thank you, Councillor Bell. All in favor of adoption as amended? Carried. And then we bring in Annie Wise, Executive Director for Sunshine Coast Tourism, who is calling in from Hawaii, I'm sure. No?
Hello. No, I wish I could have joined you tonight in person. That was my plan, but I have not seen a plow on my street since this winter weather began, so I opted to stay home. Let me just start my screen share here. Let's see. Is that working for everyone?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening. Happy holidays. Thank you for having me. My name is Annie Wise, and I am the Executive Director for Sunshine Coast Tourism. I would like to acknowledge that I am joining you today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation, and that the Sunshine Coast as a destination also includes the traditional territory of the Tla'amin, Klahoose, Hamalthko, and Squamish nations. It's my honor to work here and live here and raise my family here. I started in this role with Sunshine Coast Tourism about a year and a half ago, and I've been with the organization for about 9 years now. And so thank you for the opportunity to present to you today, and I appreciate that there are new faces on council who may not be familiar with our organization. So I wanted to take just a few minutes of your time to share who we are and what we do. I trust that you received my full year and update report, and that I'm always happy to answer questions both tonight as well as any time going forward. We are a nonprofit association. We're specifically a destination marketing organization, or sometimes also called destination management organizations. And our mission is to build a strong and sustainable tourism economy on the Sunshine Coast, consistent with the values of residents. We work to achieve that mission through 3 pillars: destination promotion, destination development and management, and by increasing awareness of the value of tourism among our governments, residents, and businesses in our region. We represent the tourism industry and stakeholders from Howe Sound all the way to Desolation Sound, with collective support from all of our local governments. And we are governed by a volunteer board of directors and supported by a small staff team. And we have 3 primary strategic documents that guide our work: our 5-year strategic business plan, we have a 10-year Sunshine Coast destination development strategy, and a regional visitor services strategy. And these documents are publicly available on our website, as well as linked in the report that I provided for this meeting. One of the key themes from all 3 of those documents is the continued focus for our organization on seasonal and geographic dispersion of visitors. So it's not about continually getting more people here. It's about strategically managing tourism growth, supporting visitation when we need it and where we need it. And so I think it's really important that all of you and residents of Sechelt and the Sunshine Coast know that we are an ally in bringing that to fruition. We are listening to residents and community. We are residents ourselves as staff who care deeply about where we live. And it's in our foundation as an organization and the best interest of all of us, I believe, to manage tourism well. And when managed well, tourism is a really incredible vessel for all sorts of things that make communities great. Tourism is an economic engine that supports job creation, generates a strong commercial tax base that helps pay for important public services and takes the tax burden off of residents. But tourism also creates a strong case for environmental conservation, cultural protection, and preservation. And tourism activity attracts businesses and amenities that make this a great place to live. As a nonprofit, we receive both public and private funding from three primary sources: our local governments, our stakeholders, and our visitors. So for over 10 years now, each of our local governments has provided a collective amount of approximately $80,000 a year, with $40,000 coming from the Northern Sunshine Coast, so the Qathet Regional District and the City of Powell River, and another $40,000 coming from the Southern Sunshine Coast, so SCRD, Town of Gibsons, and District of Sechelt, with shares within that based on a population percentage. And this core funding provides us consistency and stability to base our operations on, and we use that base as a springboard to then manage the municipal and regional district tax, also called the MRDT, that program for our region. It's a tax paid by visitors in our communities on their accommodation room bills, and it returns to Sunshine Coast Tourism for use on tourism marketing, projects, and programs to support our local community. And on top of these three pillars, we also pursue other funding opportunities in the way of grants whenever we're eligible. And one specific note I wanted to make was that in late 2018, the province changed the MRDT legislation to allow those funds to be spent on both destination marketing, as it traditionally has been legislated, and affordable housing initiatives. And as a result, we created an agreement with both the Sunshine Coast and Qathet regional districts to send a portion of the funds that is collected specifically from Airbnbs back to local government for their affordable housing initiatives. So in the SCRD, that money goes to the work of the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society. And in the last 4 years, since that legislation change, the money that has flowed through to them from the Airbnb collection has added up to approximately $250,000, with another $100,000 expected based on 2022 revenues. We do expect that in 2023 and going forward, that amount will decrease as a result of the new short-term rental regulations in Sechelt and in Gibsons. So with our budget, we then run three primary programs: one for destination promotion, a second for visitor services, and a third for destination management and development. So that's the very big picture of who we are and what we do. We are a proud partner of the District of Sechelt, and we're striving to support the district's goals. And so with the remaining few minutes, I want to share a very brief highlight from each of these programs. And of course, there's much more detail, hard to summarize a year's worth of activity in 10 minutes, but I didn't want anyone to miss out on a couple of really important things that we accomplished over the last year. On the marketing side, earlier this month, we launched an updated version of our website. As the top travel site for the Sunshine Coast region, we welcome approximately 500,000 and counting unique individuals every year to our website. It's imperative that our website successfully and seamlessly serves the content that people are looking for. And the ultimate goal of this website is to send qualified leads as business referrals. And in the past year alone, we've sent over 175,000 referrals to local businesses through our website. And we expect that to grow with our new website. So when you get a chance, head on over to sunshinecoastcanada.com for a look at our website. In addition to our website, our promotional campaigns encourage visitors to explore responsibly when and where it's needed. Our current campaign invites visitors under the slogan, "It's time to shine," which reminds them that the Sunshine Coast brings out our inner well-being by connecting with nature, exceptional culinary and cultural experiences, and highlights the benefits of traveling close to home to targeted audiences in the Lower Mainland and Seattle markets. Our most recent fall campaign generated a 24-to-1 return on investment based on verified visits as a result of our campaign and the associated visitor spending measured against our marketing spend. So we're very pleased with these results and happy to see travelers visiting in off-peak times when we need the boost to the local economy the most. So that is seasonal dispersion at work. On the destination development side, our organization is leading the implementation of our 10-year destination development strategy that's helping guide the long-term growth of sustainable tourism and revenues. Just a few very quick highlights from our work on that front. Oops, sorry, is it skipping forward? There it is. We successfully applied to the Federal Active Transportation Fund to extend the feasibility study for an all ages and ability active transportation route. Phase 1, which covered Langdale to Sechelt, was funded independently by Transportation Choices Sunshine Coast. So we applied to the federal fund to extend for a phase 2 that will go from Sechelt to Lund. So we're excited to be taking on that work in the coming year. We've also established regular progress meetings with multiple stakeholders, partners, governments, and nations to increase collaboration, expedite approvals, and align goals and efforts as it relates to tourism. We've also continued the Sustainable Sunshine Coast initiative, which works to both attract and educate respectful visitors on key issues such as water conservation, wildfires, wildlife interactions, and leave no trace principles. And a couple notes just specifically about water conservation. You can see a couple of examples there on the screen, but I just wanted everyone to know that our staff are actively engaged in communications to visitors about our water shortage. You can see this, these examples is just a couple of the ways that we educate visitors before they arrive, but it's also important to know that tourists are not the cause of the water shortage, but we also know that every drop counts. We want to make sure they're contributing positively to all of our conservation efforts. So while the community continues to address these infrastructure challenges, we will continue to use our unique voice to reach visitors and share important information about water conservation with guests to our region. And in addition to the highlights shared in my report, I want to share that Visitor Services continues to be a strong supporting complement of our overall destination strategy. As the operator for both the Sechelt and Gibson's visitor centers, plus as the DMO, the Destination Marketing Organization, we're serving visitors information both in person at our brick and mortar locations, but also online through email inquiries, social media messages, digital content like our website, maps, brochures, and even in spaces like TripAdvisor and Reddit forums. Visitor Services provides significant value in the overall traveler experience. Local expert knowledge, inspiration, and our experience means we're supporting visitors who in turn stay longer, spend more money, and generally rate their overall experience higher than those who don't stop at a visitor center, meaning they come back and are excellent visitors to our region. In addition to the value that a strong visitor services program provides the community, we also feel that as Sunshine Coast Tourism, we provide significant value as the operator of the center on behalf of the district. And despite the many challenges that we face throughout the pandemic, we have significantly reduced costs in the Sechelt and Gibson centers from their previous operators by managing these contracts and reducing duplication of effort, standardizing staff training, sharing administrative costs such as bookkeeping and accounting, and improving the branding and retail experience within the center itself. And by merging Sunshine Coast Tourism's efforts as the DMO with the visitor center operations, we've streamlined and improved the overall experience for visitors. And our staff feel deeply connected and engaged across the organization, and we look forward to bidding on the contract once again. So I know that's a lot in a very, very short period of time. I happily answer any questions you might have. There's my contact information on the screen. It's also in the report. And thank you again for your time.
Great, thank you, Annie. Councillor Inkster is referencing the last slide was in Davis Bay. Thank you for that. Any questions for Ms. Wise? Councillor Bell, please.
Annie, thank you very much in advance, first for the information you sent. Very thorough and very informative, and just some excellent marketing information. Very proud of the representation that you're doing for the district, or for Sechelt in general, the Sunshine Coast. A couple of things that I certainly noticed. It's good to see the recovery since the COVID, even of 2021. I saw sort of over more than 1,000 visits just between the 2021 and 2022, and some impressive number for the total number of visits to the visitor center, over 4,500. So I think that's tremendous, and again, great work on that. And thank you. It's an excellent job of assisting with the education on water conservation. Everything helps. And I think it's very important that, as you say, that people that are visiting the Sunshine Coast are aware of some of our challenges as well of the beauty we have to offer. Just a question in regards to, you'd mentioned that you feel that some of the numbers are going to go down in regards to the Airbnb numbers and short-term rentals in regards to, because of the new regulations. I know that that's one of the things we spoke about is part of this process is that we want to have some good stats and good measurement data. So hopefully we're looking to you at some point along the way this year or next year to see how that may be impacting some of the visitation here. So if that can, something you can assist us with, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We will continue to provide as much information as we can so that council can make as informed decisions as possible. We do have a subscription to AirDNA, which is a platform that provides pretty in-depth information around Airbnb and VRBO listings in particular. And so we'll continue. I think we've shared quite a bit of that in the past throughout the process of creating the new bylaw, and we'll continue to do so at any time.
Excellent. Great.
Thank you, Annie.
And I just had one more. Just you'd mentioned also, I know that because you've got the Jeep, which is doing a great, really adding again to the marketing. And you mentioned about some staff shortages. And I just wanted to flag that Canada Summer Jobs is going to be rolling out again soon, January. So maybe that's something again just to keep on your radar and can help you out in the summer.
Yes, thank you. We actually, the intake has already opened and we've actually have our application ready to go in, so.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Annie.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. The first question was answered with the mention of the B&Bs or the decrease, because I thought we weren't sure if we heard increase or decrease, so that was clarified. Another couple questions then, Annie. The Conserve Water promo, is that Sunshine Coast wide? Just asking you how much strength that message has lower and upper. You talk to people in Paul River and I think they joked with us about I don't even know if they went past stage 1 the last 2 summers. They may have towards the end, but they're just not, they just have so much water up there. So I just wanted to ask that one, and and I'll just ask the next question. You can answer them both at once. Is whenever tourism comes to council and Sea Shelter, I always ask and encourage shoulder season marketing, and I'm sure you're doing that. You've heard that a lot. But what I would, and it's probably been said before a number of times, is what I would say is during the summer the ferries are full, and most of our campsites are full and hotels are full. And so we hit capacity. But it's the times away, probably 6 months of the year, where we also need visitors for our businesses, hotels. Ferries are empty at some times, although we're finding that they're even full in off season. So that may not be the issue, but it's our local businesses that would love to see those visitors year round. We do have some winter activities now, so I just wanted to mention that to you. Your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I'll answer your second question first. So we do not do any paid marketing in the summer months, absolutely none. We have what we call lights on strategy. So it's like, we're still here and we're happy to help you, like help visitors and support that experience, but we do not spend any paid budget on promoting summer for those exact reasons that you mentioned. All of our paid marketing goes towards off-peak season. And so like the example in the campaign that I shared with you, that's our fall campaign that begins in late September. And so we pretty much do paid promotions from late September up until about April, and then we cut it off depending on how it looks. And so definitely we know that seasonal dispersion piece is 100% the need of the region, but we're also working to advocate to ferries. I had several meetings with their marketing team over the course of the summer, trying to advocate for better ferry service, whether that is moving the needle in their deliberations. I'm not sure, but we are, acutely aware of those challenges and making those direct connections. One of our staff sits on the Fair Area Advisory Committees for both the North and South Sunshine Coast, and trying to make sure that tourism's voice is regularly and frequently heard by ferries. With regards to the water conservation, absolutely, it's a huge challenge in terms of our messaging, because you're right, not the entire Sunshine Coast is not all under the exact same restrictions at any given time, and even just the difference between Pender Harbor and Sechelt. Often, Pender Harbor in typical years doesn't go past stage 1 or sometimes stage 2, versus for those of us that are on the Chapman system, it's a very different story. So we're definitely getting that messaging out there. Anecdotally, we've had visitors come into the visitor center that say, "Oh yeah, I saw your post on Instagram about the water restrictions and I know about it." We've also encouraged local businesses, especially accommodations. We've actually created conservation cards that they can have in their guest rooms and hotel rooms about how to conserve water, making sure that those accommodations are sharing, hey, we're on stage 4 or whatever the current situation is, and making sure that that is very clear to their guests. And I usually every spring have a handful of meetings with operations staff at the SCRD to sort of come up with our visitor communication strategy for the year, and making sure that that is aligned with SCRD operations staff.
Great, thank you, Annie. I think in the interest of time, we'll again thank you for joining us and giving us an introduction. I think we'll be seeing more of you, I'm sure, next spring as we discuss how best to help you make this even more popular as a destination. So thanks again, and Council, if it's okay with you, we'll move on to item 3.2. Bye for now, Annie.
Thank you.
Item 3.2 would be a report from our Deputy Corporate Officer that we have in front of us, Council, I think starting on page 21. Anything you want to add or enhance?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I think the report speaks for itself. One recommendation.
All right. And somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Toth, second. Councillor Shepherd. Nice of you to be here, by the way, Councillor Shepherd. Okay, any discussion? I'll explain that in a minute. All in favor of appointing Councillor Donna Bell as the chair of the CIP committee, review committee? Carried. Thank you. Thanks for doing that, Councillor Bell.
Quick thing, I'd like to thank you very much for that nomination. I know it's a very, very important program, and it's a great honor for me to represent our nonprofits. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, John.
Council item 5.1, starting on page 29, minutes for adoption. Anybody want to admit they've read them and therefore would like to move adoption? Yeah, I did, and I will. Councillor Toth is very agreeable. Thank you. I'm a seconder for the adoption of the minutes of December 7th. We need a seconder, and then we can talk to it. Are you seconding?
Sure, why not?
Okay, great.
I just had some comments, like I did the last time we had minutes for a regular meeting, that none of my points regarding why I voted against items comes across in any of the minutes. So I was kind of hoping those could be brought forward, even if it's just a small sentence to give some description of why.
Okay, the normal process for minutes, Councillor McLaughlin, is to record and report on the votes, not the underlying reasons for those, for an abstention for that matter, or a vote in opposition. So minutes are not meant to be a verbatim report of what's discussed, but of course people can always avail themselves of YouTube and have a look at what your comments were.
Well, I've done minutes for places too, and to have a small write-up about the content and the nature of the discussions,
Okay.
yay or nay, is not, I don't think, unreasonable.
Thank you. Any other comments, or if not, motion to adopt the agenda, adopt the minutes of December 7th? All in favor? All opposed? Carried. December 14th. This one is the basic minutes of a meeting going into a closed session under Section 90. A motion to adopt. Councillor Inkster, thank you. Councillor Toth, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. It is. All right. Perhaps less housekeeping in the sense that most of us were not in the APC meeting. This is item 7.1. We have the minutes. These are for receipt, essentially for our information. Motion to receive, and if you have questions, we can entertain them after that. This is on page 42. The motion, Councillor Shepherd to adopt. Second, Councillor Bell. Any discussion or questions arising from these minutes? Not. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we move on to the first substantive piece of business today, 5981 Shoal Way rezoning application. This is before us for first reading. And Council, I thought I'd just start with reminding everybody that this is an opportunity here for Council to perhaps identify key issues of concern. Perhaps there's something that maybe you feel needs to be highlighted that hasn't been, or big picture items that you feel staff should be aware of. The process involves a lengthy effort by staff and the applicant, and this is the first step where really, I guess in the layman's terms, we want to identify any big issues that are of concern to us, and for that matter, that we feel are something we want to support. This will come back to us in the weeks and months to come for second and ultimately third reading, should we get that far. I also would note that for the new members of Council, there was a permission to proceed that the previous Council voted on unanimously in favor of bringing this project forward. So I think we've got Mr. Ian Hall sitting on my right to take us through some of this, and perhaps I'll just turn it over to you, Mr. Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So yeah, just as a reminder to Council, the applicant does have a representative in the room and I think potentially online. So if you have questions for them, they are available. As Mayor Henderson noted, Council or previous Council did give permission to proceed to the rezoning application back in July of this year. So since that time, we've been working with the applicant. We did early referrals to a number of select agencies because of the OCP amendment. The applicant held their public information meeting, and we've been working on preparing bylaws for your consideration for first reading tonight. As part of that, there would be a second referral process following first reading. If it's given tonight, we would refer out again to some of the same agencies, but more of the standard agencies that we would send the bylaws to. We've also included some proposed rezoning conditions for Council's consideration, looking at, and you'll see in the other rezoning report, looking at water conservation and potential rezoning conditions around water conservation measures, as well as some other aspects. This particular application, the applicants are proposing as part of their primary community amenity contribution to transfer 6 of the townhouse units to the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society to be operated as below market rentals, so that the Housing Society would own those and operate them out of the strata. So that's something, again, as we move forward, obviously to follow up with the applicants and the Housing Society about the parameters of that, but to secure that through covenants and other mechanisms at the rezoning stage, as well as to consider timing and phasing of that. The applicant obviously has sort of proposed some phasing, and there's, obviously the idea of when we want these to be constructed and where. And, in terms of the overall rezoning application, we're only dealing with the land use change for the whole property all at once. But we're seeking council direction on some of those issues. And from there, on the water conservation side, I just want to highlight that, the district currently doesn't have a development permit area that addresses water conservation objectives. There are some guidelines in some of our form and character DPAs that talk a little bit about water conservation, but under the Local Government Act, there's specific development permit area objectives for water conservation that you can create. We don't have that yet. So at the rezoning stage, we have more leverage to consider various requirements. So that's why we're kind of bringing this forth, as if we want to look at water conservation measures through the rezoning, we can secure more than we would be able to at only the development permit stage. But apart from that, I will turn it back to council for questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. So council, for some of you, it's first time. There's a lot of data in here. Perhaps I'll start though, just in broad strokes, are there many changes to your recommendations from what was provided to council in July, the former council?
No, I mean, the applicant has increased the number of units slightly from 102 to 117, but overall the substance of the proposal hasn't changed much. They've made some additional changes based on sort of staff and public input to the site plan in terms of buffering on that eastern side of the property to sort of propose trail networks, but in terms of other aspects, it's relatively the same.
Okay. Councillor Toth, please.
Thank you. I did notice that the applicant took some of the comments from the community into account with the proposal and some minor revisions there. One question that I do have, and I regret not asking it the first time I saw it, but the stormwater retention pond that's labeled on the site, is that intended to be like a lined retention pond used for water use on site, or a water feature, or is that an infiltration pond to actually allow for the stormwater to soak in? Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Toth.
If I may, I would pass that on to the applicant to provide more detailed response.
Mr. Royer, would you like to approach the bench?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question through the mayor. I would like to confirm that it's a combination of the two items that you mentioned. It's for water retention, and then once the water reaches a certain level, if there's no irrigation pulling water out, some of the water that is in excess would either go through infiltration at a certain level, and when there's a large storm, the water would flow directly into the district storm system. So it's a combination of all three.
Okay, thank you for that. So I guess just to summarize, it is intended to be a permanent water feature. Like, it's not something that's going to run dry the majority of the time. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, then Councillor Bell, please.
Sorry, just a follow-up question, Gaetan, to the stormwater feature.
Councillor Shepherd, we'll decide if Mr. Hall is going to answer or Mr. Royer, but yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. The design of the stormwater pond, what are the security features, just so that a lot of families and kids...
you mean safety?
Yeah.
The safety security? Oh, okay. Oh.
I mean, at this time, we haven't considered any safety features. I would put that back to the applicant if they had any thoughts on that. But right now, we're just more in the reviewing the stormwater aspects to it, and obviously getting into some of the rainwater harvesting, water management type stuff we haven't
perhaps
considered.
This is a good time. It's a really good point, and maybe to phrase it that you would be interested to know will come in the way of safety for a feature like that would be an applicable comment, as opposed to how many fences are you going to put up, or, you know, is it going to be a wading pond, or, yeah.
Just general security.
Yeah, very good, thank you. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, and it may be a little, oh, yeah, I'm trying to look at John, I got to get it all right. Okay, now, it may be a little premature at this point, but I'm just curious about the grey water reuse systems. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
What we're looking at there, this is partly coming from our chief building official has been looking at applying to the province to seek a local variation to the BC building code to allow us to require grey water use in new buildings. Basically looking at connecting up showers and bathtubs and delivering that water to toilets in accordance with both Canadian guidelines for, you know, using reclaimed water and BC plumbing code stuff. But that process will take some time. So right now, it's not something we can require at a building permit stage, but at the rezoning stage, we have a lot more authority to require different things. So staff were talking about proposing that to council is, okay, here's another option for water conservation to get at sort of the more indoor water use, to look at taking what we would require or be seeking to require the authority from the province to do at a building permit stage, but require it at the rezoning stage, you know, secure it through covenant that this grey water reuse system be investigated for this development in the multifamily setting, and see if we can't make that work, and so that ultimately that kind of system, whether it's for each individual unit or for different units to share, that it would be put into place as part of the development and something that could be secured as a rezoning condition that would allow some fairly substantial water reductions in terms of having that reuse between the showers and the toilets.
Okay, and I guess what I heard there, the key word is investigate.
Yeah, that would be the first step. I mean, we know.
Stage, your recommendation is that we'd like, or staff would like the applicant to investigate the potential, the costs, I think you said. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely been in use around the world and certainly in multifamily settings. But we need the applicant to kind of take a look at their own development, see what can work in this context.
So maybe you could educate us in that context to find, they do some investigation, what happens next from your point of view, the staff's perspective, and ultimately the council?
Yeah, I think the intent would be, once the applicant has done that investigation, they report back to us, we can report back to council and say, here's what the options are for this development, whether it's something as, I mean, the ideal being, oh yeah, we can incorporate this into every townhouse unit in this manner, and this is how we can secure it moving forward, or we can do it in these units and not in these other units. So that's sort of what we're looking for.
Okay. So that your recommendation right now is to do that investigation.
Yeah.
We're not setting a particular precedent at this point that it will be done for every future development.
No, I think it's something we're looking at proposing as a recommended condition for other rezonings moving forward for investigation, and as we kind of get more data on what's possible, being able to refine those requirements for other developments.
Okay, great, thank you. On this side of the table, Councillor Inkster, and then I see Councillor McLaughlin's fingers poised.
So this proposal has come to us at, I mean, considering that the District of Sechelt's an organic creature and things continue, but this is quite a large proposal that's come to us for, in a sense, late proposal. I have a number of questions, but I was, in a sense, unorthodoxly, I was hoping Councillor Toth would speak a little more about why they supported it then. Okay. Because he's the only one, there's only, right. With one away, there's only him here as to why they supported this. There's a number of issues, obviously. I mean, there's going to be an introduction of more traffic onto a roadway that's, it's not a really, I mean, it should be it'll be part of our future plans, but it's not a really good road there as an example. That's just one issue I have. Now that it will probably work, it's just this is a lot of, because of the density here. And I was hoping to see a GPS map somewhere, because these aren't that clear to me as exactly where it is. I'm assuming it's a long trail and then you turn right.
It's across from the arena.
Okay, I looked at the map again and I thought, okay, there is some property, but it's on a slope.
It is.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's why I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So it's pretty steep, but that's fine though. They have a plan to make it work. So those are just a couple of my initial thoughts, because it's quite a large development. I mean, one of my other ones, just as a throwaway, is I'm wondering if they'll end up with white buildings in the end, but you know, because you look at it and go, white?
Okay, well, that might be a little bit ahead of first reading.
Sure. It's just like the color scheme, right? When they want it to how it fits, right?
Okay. I think that's a very good, your first question, Councillor Toth, if you are able, we're putting you on the spot a bit, and I realize I'm delinquent. Councillor Rowe apologizes for not being here, but she is en route to a Christmas vacation, and her flight was delayed, as most flights were, and so she's, I believe, in the air as we speak, rather than being able to join us. So with that, you can say anything you want, because she's not listening.
Anything I want, eh? Let me get going. Yeah, the previous council was supportive of it, because we need a diversification of types of housing. You can't just keep stamping down single-family homes. And this project is looking to preserve a lot of ground. It's not just high lot coverage all across the property. As for the traffic side of things, that's something that has to come back through the referral processes. When it was permission to proceed, it's permission to proceed. And the council of the time was not opposed to the idea, and yeah, quite favorable to the need for units. And speaking to Councillor Inkster's comment on the color of the buildings, I think it may have been something I raised as well as a concern. So, you know, I get that. I have my concerns for white buildings in this community as well, but that'll be up to the applicant to sort out.
All right, very good. Now, Councillor
To the Mayor, thank you for the opportunity, but I just want to say I'm not opposed to properly planned sustainable growth with sufficient water resources in place and assured for the foreseeable future. We all ran on water, and we all have that as our top priority. And some of us even mentioned during some of our all candidates meetings that we are so concerned about water that we would curb development. And so this project certainly doesn't curb development. However, I'm deeply concerned about these large developments coming forward that are premature and overly detailed at the building level. We need to pause and step back and discuss a better approach and the broader implications of these proposals for the following 6 reasons, which I might go into some for detail. But the CRD, we have the water problem, number one. We don't have water, okay? We know that. Anyway, that's a whole paragraph I could go into, but the CRD also does not acknowledge the water problem. I have issues with that. During this report as well, it was, you know, it wasn't clear that they supported it, but they don't claim to have much concerns or comments, which I find quite profoundly interesting given what we've just been through. Sechelt First Nations has issues with these applications. They've got a whole list on page, I think 45 or 49 of all their concerns. And development cost charges are much too low right now. We mentioned that in our budget meeting, and that needs serious updating. New neighborhood planning, I believe, plans is required. We should do, I think, a neighborhood plan for this area that we could, it's a rural area. It's become more urban, and it needs to accommodate some housing density and deeply affordable units, especially maybe for single-family parents near a school. The Reef Road, Choway proposals both are close to each other, if you could see them on a map. And they should form we should use them to form a comprehensive, planned, innovative new neighborhood. Our staff could be directed to develop such a plan and the area is bounded by Lighthouse, Shoal, Trail, and Reef, hand in hand with the residents and First Nations. We could use the plan then to show landowners and builders, et cetera, what the community wants and where we want to have it. This would show leadership and collaboration with the community and our First Nations planners, school planners, et cetera, and protect the natural assets. We could plan more appropriate infrastructure for the new neighborhood. And new neighborhood plans would inform the future revised OCP, and it would probably also inform our vision plan going forward. So I think this type of proposal at this point, I think, should be tabled, and we should take some serious time to do a local area plan for this particular rural area, and come up, I think, with a much better result in the end that serves more being a green development with integrated systems and something that we could be proud of as a community. As it is, I find we're getting ad hoc developments coming forward to us based on just land speculation. And if you look at the ads on realtor.ca, you'll see that it's clearly said that don't worry, the OCP can be amended, the rezoning can be amended, the townhouses and apartments can pretty much go anywhere. And right now, I think on this lot there are, is there one or two homes?
Sorry, I've got to call you on that. That's not an accurate representation.
What isn't?
The OCP, it's fair. The OCP can be amended. Other things can be amended. It doesn't mean they will be.
Well, it doesn't have to be amended, and when you amend it, you're responsible for the consequences. And I think in this case, the consequences are severe.
We are.
They're severe with water and with planning.
That is your opinion.
Yes, it is, very much, my opinion.
Very good.
And being a planner, I think I have years of developing that opinion. I have a list of things I could go through. I don't know if you're willing to.
Well, briefly, please. Recognizing that this is first reading.
Right. So why do we continue to entertain such large projects? Residents do not sacrifice so much water and reduce their water use by half every summer for new developments. They do it to try and ensure that they have
Councillor McLaughlin, sorry. Your point about water has been made repeatedly, and that's adequate. Thank you. It's noted. It is. We all agree with that.
Well, then we should think about new water uses coming online. Why are we using more water? We're using more water with developments. We're not finding new water.
So what's your next point?
Well, the SCRD does not really acknowledge the water problem, so maybe we have to do it and take the leadership role. Seashelt is 11,000 of the 20,000 people served by the Chapman watershed. We currently have no long-term water solution, while SCRD staff are redirected to the Emergency Operations Center, and they must leave their regular jobs. It's a crisis. Our SCRD board members did not mention any big ideas about water supply solutions that some politicians promised, as water utility rates were increased about 25% for 2023.
So we're here to talk about, Councillor McLaughlin, we're here to talk about this application.
Well, and the next one.
Please focus on this application.
These are issues that do pertain exactly to this application. First Nations have issues on page 49 of the agenda package, like I mentioned. They are a referral agency with provincial support to ensure that we support their needs. We are trying to work closer with Sechelt First Nations, so we need to pause what we are doing here. Development cost charges are much too low. They need updating. These developments are very infrastructure intensive and could put a strain on existing infrastructure and may cost taxpayers even more. I mentioned about a neighborhood plan. I know we haven't had neighborhood plans, but I think in this case, as we become more developed, we do need neighborhood plans in this area and maybe other areas. Lastly, these developments do not set a good precedent in terms of planning with too much density on steep and challenging environmentally sensitive sites. They do not acknowledge the sense of place that we have here. We should not have to worry about ad hoc projects coming to council every time these rural properties come on the market. Comments are that Shoal Way is too dense. That's the comments and what was in their report. And,
From some people.
they are not, well, that's the feedback they got, and
From some people.
the people that they got feedback
Yes.
from, some of them,
That's fair.
most of them. And also, they're not really what I would call townhouses when they're like, what I saw there, one was like 8 stories high, okay? It doesn't look like a seashell that is.
I'm sorry.
I was looking
I'm
at the
sorry.
plans.
That's not accurate. You need to go back and look at the plan.
Well, that's
There are
what I
no
saw.
8-story townhouses, townhouse units.
Well, it's stepped so that it can be as high as 8 stories. It doesn't look like a seashell that is the beautiful, caring, nature-inspired place I know.
Okay.
So for these reasons, I request that the project is indefinitely tabled so that neighborhood planning can be undertaken.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, let us be ready to find builders and developers that want to
Thank you,
do
Councillor
much
McLaughlin. Is
more
that a motion?
community-integrated and appropriate projects.
Councillor McLaughlin,
Well-
is that a motion to table?
I will make it if people want first to discuss.
No, the
some of
motion to table, if you make it, we'll get a seconder, and I believe there's no discussion on the motion to table. So are you making that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion to table this project. Is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, we'll carry on. Councillor Shepherd, please.
I'm trying to respond to Councillor McLaughlin's points. There's so many points in that statement, and they're valid. And I think we all ran on many of them. But I think it comes down to a basic philosophy of should we, if I can summarize it, and I'll probably do a bad job, Councillor McLaughlin, it seems to come down to a belief that we should stop everything while we investigate all of the issues that you mentioned, like water and new community plan and so forth. And I guess my own personal philosophy is no, and I mentioned this in the election, that we have to go ahead with both. And I think this council, we're only a month or two into it, but that we are pursuing both water, which is all of our top priorities, and we're dealing with development at the same time. And this is the nature of the development that personally I'm looking for. So, I'm in favor of agreeing to the first reading of this.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Toth, please.
Thank you. Across the street from a major recreational facility, directly on a bus route, and just around the corner from a school is just about as perfect place as you can have for additional density. I keep hearing we all ran on water, and I just want to point out I didn't run on water. Nowhere is it in my platform. Was it in my platform? So no, we didn't all run on water. Some of us did run on, updating the OCP, ensuring that our growth was managed, sustainable. I do recognize the comments that have been made. I'm entirely in favor of proceeding with first reading on this project so that we can get the proper referrals underway and see what comes back from everybody through the process.
Okay.
And I'm happy to move the recommendations that are all there.
Okay. And Councillor Bell will second them. Any further discussion? Councillor Inkster.
Well, I mentioned it previously. It's come to us at this hour. So there's some difficult questions in front of us. I need more information as we go forward. So I said, as we go forward, I need more information on the water uses that they're making on site, the gray water, the pond system they'll have in place. We do have just for council members to know, and I think some know, we do have a district pond, water control pond system about 300 feet away. For Councillor Shepherd, I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's probably quite deep now, so it's probably going to be similar to this, and it's quite close by. You can go feed the ducks there if you want one day. It's quite, yes, yeah, lots of them. So it's on the other side of the arena. So this system that probably could work in this, it will be needed in this area, and I'm sure it will be safe. But I do want more information on that. The gray water system's interesting, but the investigate word is a little bit gray and weak to me, so it would need to have a further discussion on that. And I've mentioned the other issues. Okay. One of the questions, and when Councillor McLaughlin mentioned some of her concerns, the time at which we would say no to things while we do further OCP reviews, it's undefined to me, and that's where my concern would be. It's how long do we do these reviews of everything before we say to developments that are in our pipeline or plans in our pipeline, we're interested. So that's where it gets problematic for me. But what I wanted to ask through you to planning is, after we do first reading, and I am supportive of that, when will it come back to us? Okay. What kind of work will be done? And there's a number of questions in here that I think planning has heard from council, and I don't mind if you're okay with it.
Why don't we
if you're okay with it, going to mentioning some of these issues to planning about some of my issues or how we'll proceed, because I'm receiving it late. So I want to be supportive, but I have a lot of questions. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that I speak for any party, both staff and applicants, who will listen to meetings like this to pick up on what we're saying might be our concerns expressed in future meetings. So for you saying you've got some questions, there's a heightened awareness. And I would agree with that. There's hints in what we might say or decide to do in the future that come out of a meeting such as this, including concerns expressed by all of us. For me, I would add, if I might, that I'm concerned at this stage that we not set binding precedents on any projects. It's an early day to say we will require something. I do like the idea of investigate the gray water, because that leaves it open for us to find better, more innovative ways of developing future projects. So, in the concern I would have is only regarding item 5 of the recommendations, where this, as written, we're requiring the water conservation measures to be implemented. At this stage, philosophically, I agree, but I don't know that, maybe it's okay, maybe it's general enough that we can work with it, but it's sort of a little bit too descriptive, or prescriptive, I should say, for me, but it's not a major issue. I wanted to add one more thing from my comments, and that is that I certainly ran on water and several other things. Safety, and another little issue called housing. And that's where I come to the project like this is vitally important. We need to do them all, and we need to do them all now. So I'm certainly in favor of first reading, subject to some of the little details. And Councillor Toth will probably tell me about the little details.
The gray water reuse system specifically, I just wanted to highlight this because this is the first project that's come forward looking at the investigation for the cost of implementing a gray water reuse system since we made those changes, or the request that our staff look at the variance for the local area. We got a really high level overview during that report's introduction as to what it could cost to implement a gray water reuse system on a house or on a dwellings of a smaller scale, I should say, lesser scale. And until we start testing the water, so to speak, or until the information comes back from the province, we're not going to really be able to say with any certainty whether this is something we could or should or even need to do. After we passed that resolution to have staff look at the area variance, I had a couple members of the community reach out to me and show me what the cost implications would be for them to install one in their house that they were building right then. And for them, it actually made more sense from a practical perspective to pay that towards water DCCs, to just pay for new region-wide infrastructure rather than trying to maintain something on a residential scale. So this is just an investigation. You know, I'm not tied to it either.
No. But that's a very good point. Maybe we discover that we can use that sort of funding to find more water instead of running more pipe. Very good. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so looking at all these costs of alternatives, that's always going to be the discussion. What are the costs of the alternatives? What's the cost of using the existing system? It's like private sewage plants versus hooking up to the district seashells. So we'll look into that. We'll hear more about it because there's some time. The roofs that they presented in the photographs are great rain collectors, water collectors. And so once again, if they find a system on site to store some of the water that they most likely will use for probably irrigation, I'm assuming, good on them if they can look at that. It's we're going to hear as we go through this term, every time we get a proposal in front of us for people that want to live in this beautiful place we all call home, we're going to hear about water. Water is going to be our big issue. We all know that. And we are looking at solving it. We're trying to solve it. There's a lot of challenges. So I think we need to engage the people with the proposals to say, can you look at, I hope you have systems if you've got a big plan in front of you to have water on site where it's just people want to live here. So we have to find a way. I don't know how fast we can move at the region with a solution. So we're going to have to do this 2 or 3 different ways. Thanks.
Very good. Yes, I think that's a very, very good comment. Next, Councillor McLaughlin, but if I may, I wanted to also reference the recommendation 7. Is staff happy with the prescriptive nature that this will go to the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society? I am aware that there may be some, the society is fairly new, and whether this is a very legalistic terminology, and I guess I'd propose a friendly amendment that captures the spirit of what this is, but to the SCAHS or another entity acceptable to the district. Because this is binding us to deal strictly with that group. So we can come back to that in a minute, but let you ponder that one. Councillor McLaughlin, please.
I just wanted to point out the idea of collecting rainwater and cisterns and that is not that unique, because after about May, we're not allowed to use tap water to water anything anyway. So that, to me, is kind of a moot point, and I don't see that really changing. I know for to use rainwater for toilets and such, we've been doing that in institutional buildings since like 2008. Not uncommon. In terms of even collecting water and treating it yourself for drinking, that is also a possibility. It's quite a bit of work and responsibility. Nobody really likes to do it, but I've spoken to local health officials, and they say, yes, it is possible. So maybe they could maybe they could do that, because that would be a step, really a major step that would be quite innovative. But and also to even have their own septic system on site, which obviously they don't plan to do. But really, I think septic systems use less water than using a sewage treatment system that has to flush this stuff all over for who knows how far.
That's not factually correct. Okay, so we'll move on. What's your next point?
The water treatment center is in fact the second biggest user of water. Next first is the hospital.
It's not accurate.
Well, I'm just saying there are more efficient ways to use
What's your next point, please?
That's it for water right now. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Bell.
Bear with me. And we keep calling ourselves the newbie, and we are. I'm just trying to keep my eye on the ball here. So we've got this in front of us. My understanding in my role tonight is that we're looking at each one of these points, and we are agreeing as to whether we motion for a first reading. on these points. Is that correct, what is expected of us
Yes.
tonight?
Yes.
Okay, so that's good. I think I got that in here now.
And it will come back for second and third.
Yes,
and
and that is when all
potentially-
of the questions that we're asking tonight, which are great questions, will come forward. So they
Council-
won't be missed out. They will come forward in second reading.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
A second or third reading.
Okay,
And a public hearing potentially, and a whole range of things.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor McLaughlin and then Councillor Toth.
I'm just wondering as well, if there is a opportunity here to add, an element to this these recommendations, to make it, clear that if the development does not go forward in terms of construction within 2 years, that the rezoning and the OCP amendments revert back. My concern is that upzoning land, especially to this density, can be quite speculative and is very hard to reverse. So I think if we seriously want to do this, and it's such a, like Darren said, it's quite a very intensive project for Sechelt, that we should have a caveat in there that if they're not truly starting construction in 2 years, that it reverts back to the zoning today and the OCP that we have today, and then somebody else can take a crack at it at a later date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Toth was next, and then Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you. That's actually a concern that I share with Councillor McLaughlin around not this particular property, but a lot of these projects. We've had, rezoning applications come before us over the last term that by the time the meeting's done, the property's listed on MLS with, rezoning approved. I've gently asked about it in the past, and I think I've heard answers as to whether it's possible or not. But I think it would be a good request of staff after we deal with these recommendations, because I think that's a wider policy decision that I think we should look at options on or get a report back on specifically. So,
okay,
just some comments. As for the Affordable Housing Society townhouse units here, you had also asked or contemplated if staff are okay with that wording.
Yes,
as it is.
I didn't wait for an answer, did I?
No, you didn't. And if staff are comfortable with that wording, is that something that we can fairly easily change at a later date?
Thank you for keeping me on track. Staff, any comments about the Affordable Housing Society, the specificity of that word?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Valid point. We appreciate it. I think the intent here is to recognize transfer to a not-for-profit housing society. It could be as simple as, at one point we had the Affordable Housing Society. We also had the Workforce of Affordable Housing Society at one point. So there were, in fact, two societies not too long ago. So the intent is to recognize transfer to a not-for-profit housing society rather than specifically choosing the Affordable Housing Society. But that's who we have at this time. So transfer to the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society and or another comparable not-for-profit housing society.
Acceptable to the district.
Yes.
So, okay. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Okay. Perhaps, Councillor Shepherd, did you want to speak to the amendment, or was it something else?
It was something else.
Okay, if you could hold that, then is there any discussion on the amendment? Councillor McLaughlin, is there any discussion? If not, I'll call the question on the amendment to add that phrase. That you got that? Great. Okay. We all clear? All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Shepherd, please.
I also wanted to support Councillor McLaughlin's idea of the 2-year time limit for building. And I'm in favor of the motion as it's written, but perhaps staff could come back prior to second reading or at second reading with some commentary on that issue. Okay, thank you.
I think that's fine.
you know, it would be interesting if the motion was at approval, that with the clock starts.
At adoption.
At adoption and
Yeah.
final approval. And that two's an interesting set of years. That's 24 months. I know everyone knows that. It's just when you're putting a project together, it takes a while. And it should be pretty clear to us, and to the proponent, that they can't get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if two's too early or three. And people may say, well, why three's too long? Well, I've seen in Sea Shelter over the last number of years a number of projects, and we're hearing about one on the bluff that's sitting there, and people are uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you're going to make a motion? Is that what you're saying? No?
Well, no, I just wanted to call a point of order because we do already have recommendations on the floor.
Yes, we do.
And this isn't germane to those exact recommendations that are here, so.
Do you dare? No.
My comment is the same thing about the 2 years. I'm just not sure if that's the time to decide. I mean, with labor shortages, et cetera, it just seems difficult.
So to Councillor Toth's point, let's hold that for a second. I think I feel a motion requesting something from staff coming, but we will first of all address the recommendation before us is as written with an amendment to recommendation 7A, which we voted on a minute ago. Any further comments from staff? Any further questions? Are you voting, Mr. Hall? Or?
No, just through the chair, just to remind, at first reading, I mean, when we're proposing rezoning conditions, I mean, nothing's set in stone. I mean, what our intent is to bring something early to council to say, to float these concepts, seek direction, and ideally doing that earlier so that when we get, closer to the public hearing, that we've kind of solidified what the rezoning conditions are, what their amenity contributions will be, and all those pieces, so that the public is aware of that whole package, so that ideally when it gets to third reading, we can outline exactly what those conditions are, so that they know what they have to do in order to meet adoption. And so it's just bringing that early so we can get direction from council on that and determine specifics as we move forward.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hall. All right, council, if you're ready for the question, I believe this is the recommendations as written on page 45 of our agenda with the amendment to 7A. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor McLaughlin is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Does anybody need a quick break, or are you okay?
First reading first.
Man.
Yeah, Brenda's not here.
Yeah, so that that is first reading recommendation. So.
It's in there.
Channeling my inner corporate officer.
All right, Councillor Toth, would you like to move that we give first reading to the OCP amendment number 49231 regarding 5981 Shoal Way?
I will move first reading.
Is there a seconder for first reading? Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? First reading. Opposed? Councillor McLaughlin. And then we'll give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw 58002 regarding 5981 Shoal Way. Councillor Bell, second. Councillor Toth. Any discussion? This is first reading, number 2 of our recommendations. We're actually giving first reading to the bylaw. So first reading, all in favor of the zoning bylaw amendment. Opposed? Councillor McLaughlin opposed. The motion carries. And I think we're done. Am I done? Are we done? Thank you. Great. Okay, then, would you like to give? No? Chief. Okay, let's, then we'll move on to item 8.2. You may. You want a 5-minute break.
Thank you. I do want a 5-minute break because my coffee's empty, but that's okay. I can suffer. So nobody else wants one, I will suffer it through. However, with the conversation that we were having at this table around the possible reversion mechanisms, I'd like to make a motion that staff bring back a report looking at possible mechanisms for zoning and OCP amendments to revert if construction hasn't commenced within a reasonable time frame.
Okay?
I'm not putting a specific timeline on it because
No, you're looking for a report from staff.
whether
on-
it's even legal.
Yes, and is that a second, or?
Yes. Reasonable though, but I know what Councilor Todd's trying to do. He's just trying to get it out there. I think that words, okay, I hope staff heard what we were saying when it comes back.
I'm pretty sure they're listening.
You know?
First, we need to know if it's legal before we set a time limit.
Yeah.
Okay, any?
Too much property just sitting there.
Okay. So, is there any discussion on that? Not getting any horrible glares, so all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you for that. Now you know what? You've earned a 5-minute break.
I think Councillor Toth needs a break.
Let's, we'll take 5 minutes. We'll be back at 8:21, please. Thank you, everyone.
Need to do it or not.
Welcome back to the council meeting of December 22nd. Council, we have item 8.2 on our agenda, page 100. And this is for first, second, and third readings, if you wish, for the bylaw enforcement implementation amendment bylaw. Anybody like to? Well, do we want an introduction, Mr. Allen? Do you want to?
Thank you. Your Worship, I did not prepare a PowerPoint, not to worry. One moment while I turn on my camera. Thank you. So the nature of this one ultimately is to align our bylaws. Bylaw 515, our bylaw enforcement notification bylaw, does contain reference to zoning bylaw 25, which was repealed in October. It seemed premature to bring in bylaw amendments prior to adoption of zoning bylaw 580. Immediately after zoning bylaw 580 was adopted, there was an election and inaugural meeting and a number of priorities, and this is something we wanted to ensure we completed by the end of the year. So the primary intent is to simply expunge references to a repealed zoning bylaw 25, insert references to bylaw 580. The secondary recommendation here would be to increase the level of some of the fines, the fines being a little bit low for cost of doing business per se, for incentive for compliance and enforcement. And so increasing some of those fines from they were 100 and or 125 to a mixture of 300 and 400 based on enforcement standards and best practice and what we think might be suitable. And it's a secondary suggestion to council here for your consideration. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for no PowerPoint. Council, any questions, or could go to first reading and then have questions, or up to you? Could you press Councillor Bell's microphone button?
Andrew, or it may be in the mayor, it may be in the information here. How long? When was the last time we increased the fees? Is it in here somewhere? Or?
Most
probably is.
It'd be a while, I would think.
Yeah. Through your worship, I believe bylaw 515 was adopted in 2012.
2012.
I believe it was 2 years ago, possibly 3. We brought in a suite of amendments simply to tie it together with our other municipal ticket indexing bylaw, add in applicable fines for a number of things that our bylaw enforcement officers had noted was a shadow or a gap in their enforcement capability. So as you can note here, this is the 12th amendment to that bylaw. That's our numbering system. But it has been some time, and some of those fees, $100 is quite low. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Councillor McLaughlin, please.
I was just wondering if Andrew could tell us how much we might have collected in fees this past year in fines. Yes. Based on the schedule.
I'm looking. How about it's a fair comment and question. Will an answer needed for you to vote on this, Councillor McLaughlin?
No, an answer isn't needed for that, but I noticed with the SCRD and their water fines, they give them lots of warning, and in the end, they actually didn't collect much money. Mm-hmm. But maybe as things got worse, they got more serious, but so it's not a big money maker, I think, but because we do try and give people second chances and things.
Yes, yeah, please.
I'll take a stab at it, and unfortunately, this is not my regular computer, which is upstairs receiving some kind of update, and I don't have a direct link to it. I do remember we're well above projection. We do issue fines. We are diligent in this issue. We had one particular property that had to go to collections because the repeated fines were not paid. So that really bumped us up significantly. But we do issue fines. But we're duty bound by procedural fairness. Case law proves that time and again. We need to be extremely measured and fair in our enforcement of bylaws. There is a provision for early payment reduction. We do use warnings. Ultimately, our goal here is compliance. We do bring in revenue, so that revenue is utilized for the towing of vehicles that get left on high priority roads, Cowrie Street, Wharf Avenue, and so forth. So there is some revenue that comes in, but that's not the primary intent of enforcement. Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. So we're not making money to cover our enforcement issues. We're more using that revenue to mitigate the infractions. Yeah. And since I'm talking for a minute, I mentioned this before, and I'd like staff to think about this. It's certainly not worth resolving today, but the concept of early payment, what is the point? And I don't even want a response right now, but I just think it's well worth us assessing. Does it really achieve anything for us, given we're already giving people a lot of latitude and we're trying to work with them to comply? So if you don't do it, you should pay the full price. But anyways, that's editorial for today. Councillor Shepherd?
I'm just wondering how the proposed fee structure compares to the SCRD. Is it comparable? Are we using the sort of same rates for the same type of infraction?
Through your worship, yeah, I do believe it is comparable. I don't, of course, have that bylaw open in front of me, but I do believe that the BENS system provides a maximum fine of $500. Often we'll hear it maybe at community engagement saying, fine them, make it meaningful, fine them $100,000 or something, but we have a box that we exist within. And so $500 being the top end for these typical fines. And so we're less than that, but in scope.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is before us for first and, if you wish, second, and if you wish, third reading. So I'll entertain a motion for first reading of the bylaw on pages 102, 3 and 4, I think. Yes. And 105. Councillor Inkster, Councillor Toth, all in favor of first reading? Carried. Motion for second reading. Councillor Shepherd, Councillor McLaughlin, did I see? Thank you. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of second reading? Carried. And a motion for a third reading. Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Shepherd, all in favor of third reading? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We move on then to minor housekeeping amendments on page 106. Do you have a PowerPoint for us today?
Sorry, Your Worship, I believe we need to go through the readings that each be read for the first, for the second, for the third. Oh.
You didn't use enough words.
We moved first, and then we moved second, and then we moved third.
Oh, my apologies. I missed the initial agreement.
I did, but I may not have moved receipt of the report. But yeah. We didn't move to receive to make the recommendation. Is that okay?
Right.
All right, Councillor.
My apologies. That the important part was completed.
Just trying to get out of here by 9 o'clock, as requested. Okay, well, I think I saw I'll second that. How about that? All in favor of the recommendation on page 100? Thank you very much. Carried. Page 106, the housekeeping amendments for bylaw 580. And are you speaking to this, Mr. Allen?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. So this is an unusual one, I admit. Of course, as Council is aware, the zoning bylaw 580 was adopted on October 6th. Right at the end of the process, we identified a couple errors, and this is post-public hearing, so it put us in a bit of a spot, and there was a commitment with property owners as well as the previous council that we would follow up before the end of the year. And so here we are, we made it just in time. So there are two changes that I would contend or suggest, I should say, are fairly minor. When we did the appointed zones for property, we really utilized the Schedule C1, 2, and 3, the land use designations of the official community plan. And so there's a property in the Tilican Bay area on the upper side of Seashell Inlet Road that has a rural residential designation in the official community plan. And every property, as far as I know, in the district of Sechelt that had the rural residential official community plan designation, we appointed the RU1 zone to. With the exception of this property, by accident, I'm not sure, I think as far as we can tell, it's the only property in the entire district that we accidentally gave a zoning that we didn't want to. Of course, so we gave it the RU2 zone. The RU2 zone is a zone that we applied to private managed forest lands, to provincially owned forest, crown land, if you will. And it wasn't intended to apply to this property. But noting that it was post-public hearing when this was discovered and contemplated, we were kind of stuck, if you will. We noted to the property owner as well as representation from the community association that we would resolve this, and we're following through with that resolution. The second one is related but different. It's adding a forest management activities to the RU2 zone. And this is to clarify that the RU2 zone, which again applies to private managed forest as well as crown forest, that forest management activities is a priority use. And we're enhancing the definition based on what the Private Managed Forest Council uses, and we're adding it, or proposing to add it to the RU2 zone. Previously, we were kind of saying, well, silviculture is a part of the definition of agriculture, which is permitted in the RU2 zone. So we would never stop anybody from managing forests and crown forests or private forests, but the zoning itself was not explicit enough. And the Private Managed Forest Act does explicitly state that a municipality or local government cannot adopt a bylaw which is in contravention to the Private Managed Forest Act. So we, in a roundabout way, accidentally did, although you could still use silviculture as a permitted use within the definition of agriculture, but we were really delving into the minutia of zoning interpretation by suggesting that was acceptable. So really, we're introducing a definition, which is provincial standard definition, into the zoning bylaw, and introducing that defined use within the RU2 zone to, frankly, fix an inadvertent error that we made. So those are the two inadvertent errors that we found in our brand new zoning bylaw applying to all of the district. So to shed that in a positive light, I think that's a good track record of the bylaw that we've created. And we do suggest that these two are needed to be done, make sense, and therefore testing the possibility of proceeding without public hearing for these two amendments.
And the owner and the neighbors have been part of this?
We corresponded with them back in October and November, and subject to tonight's resolution, we'll be in touch as soon as tomorrow.
Okay. I guess, yeah. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I've heard the explanation. I'm perfectly fine with moving forward to housekeeping, although it sounded like one was ultra vires, so, right? I mean, wouldn't have, right? It might not have worked anyway, but I'm prepared to move this to help staff deal with some.
Their first and last mistake of the year?
I hope this is their first and last, yeah. Oh, of this year? No, this year and next year, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're moving that we agree with we're moving the recommendation.
Yeah, like I said, one's probably ultra vires, but let's move them and just clean it up.
Okay,
yeah.
And second, Councillor Toth. Any questions? Councillor McLaughlin?
I just wondered if the landowners are in agreement with this, supportive? Just want to ask. Thank you.
Yes, fair question, and that's our expectation, is that they are, but we will reconfirm. I wanted to present tonight, receive feedback from council, and then reconfirm afterwards, particularly with the property in Tilican Bay, which was something that was presented to us from the owner and the Tilican Bay Community Association, so we do fully expect that they are.
Okay, that's where I was going. So the ones that this applies to now, this particular property, are all fine, but we're changing the definition of RU2.
We're adding a definition for proposed use. We would add into the RU2, which applies to multiple parcels, right, private and publicly owned throughout the right district. But the one for Tilican Bay is a very specific one property, which relates to the OCP and relates more to what the old zoning was and is the right thing to do, because we're not trying to designate this property as a resource.
But is this is changing the RU2 zoning across the district?
That's correct. It's adding forest management activities as a permitted use.
So, we know one owner is okay with it, but there may be others that will have some input when it comes back to us.
It's possible, but that's the intent of the RE2 zone is forest management and rural resource. So in some respects, it's hand in glove and makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any further questions? No. I'll call the question. All in favor of proceeding without a public hearing? Carried. Thank you. We have no new business. We can go to item 10.1, 5875 Reef Road. And I believe we again have Mr. Hall. I meant at our break to ask, are you able, without too much trouble, to move your desk a little bit that way so that Councilors Inkster and McLaughlin can? Great. That's good. Thanks, Mr. Hall.
Okay, thank you. Mayor and Council, we have before you another rezoning application for property near the Shoalway property, but this one fronts on Reef Road, and this is a permission to proceed report. So where the previous application was back in July, this one is coming before council for the first time. Staff have been working with the applicants for a while now. They've been doing a lot of investigation on their site. The property has a lot of environmental constraints, and they've done a lot of work to define the riparian areas on the property and try to deal with where they can and cannot develop on the site. So their proposal has kind of changed in a few iterations since we were first dealing with their proposal before they even applied. So what they've done now, they're at the stage where they finally made a complete application, and we're bringing a report to council as a first look. And the intent with the permission to proceed reports, again, is bring something before council, get some early direction from council on whether or not they support the application moving forward, and identify issues to be addressed and concerns from council or staff to be resolved. So you'll note in the report there's a number of items that we've talked about in terms of issues that are unresolved. Certainly in terms of sort of transportation and road networks, this is kind of sitting in an area that requires more work. The transportation master plan project may, as it comes forward, as we get a draft in the new year, may provide some high level direction in this area, but it won't provide a local road area, local road network for this property.
If I might, could you just back up for a second and explain what we're doing when you're asking for permission to proceed? Like that is a precursor, I think, for the newbies. What are we committing to as a council?
Sure, good question. What we've done with the permission to proceed report, the idea being it's an opportunity for council to have an early look at the application, and potentially, if there is little or no support from council on the application, to be able to say no at an early stage before the applicant invests too much further time in an application. It's an opportunity to provide, even getting permission to proceed isn't any guarantee of approval or anything. It's really more just proceeding with the application review, proceeding with development of bylaws that would come back to council at a future meeting for a first reading. So it's really just an early opportunity for council to have their say on the application, whether or not they support it, whether they want to have staff spend more time working with the applicant to bring it back into a bylaw form or not.
Okay.
So that's
thanks. So we're not making commitments other than if we vote in favor of this, we're committing staff resources to work on this.
Yeah, just to be able to move it forward with the intent that we would bring back bylaw amendments for first reading at a future date. That's the only.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah. Okay. I think there's a lot of data in this report.
Yeah, there's a lot to wade through, and again, like I said, there's a number of issues still to be resolved. Certainly, the transportation and road network piece is a big one. The applicants obviously are proposing one configuration. As we note in the report, the issue of the marine way dedication is an unresolved one. There's sort of the issue of the larger network in the area as part of a subdivision, a future subdivision, part of what we would look at is access to lands beyond, and that's something we need to look at this stage too, given the where the property is and where the existing road dedications are. There's also constraints with the location of various creeks and other habitat that do affect even the existing road dedication feasibility, so that there's some other pieces that need to be further investigated there. But
right. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bell, and yes, please.
Yeah, so I think you've already talked about this. One of the things that just came up and just let me know if this is correct or not. When I look at that plan, it looks like that area is fairly ripe for development. I mean, I don't know, there's a lot of vacant land there. I don't know what's on there. I haven't gone up there and had a look and put my gun boots on to see what's actually in there. But actually, that is a question if we would be looking at an area plan in there in terms of, amenities, transportation, part of the master transportation plan, et cetera. That would be all part of this consideration as we look forward. And I believe you said that. I just want to make sure that is being considered.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, we're not looking at doing a neighborhood area plan for this area, but certainly this property, the one directly north of this property, and then obviously the two Shoalway properties, and then there's a couple more to the west of this property. There's about 6 or 8 properties that between sort of Shoal and Reef that form a big chunk of area that whether needs to be further work, at least in terms of the road network, but certainly in terms of neighborhood planning. The OCP has a number of those properties designated special infill. This particular property for this application is outside the special infill area. It's designated residential under the OCP, but it's certainly an area where there's further work to be done in terms of what's going on in there. The creek does run through a number of those properties, and there's the issue of the Lighthouse Road to the west, obviously Marine Way being that east-west connection, and then sort of access and servicing throughout this whole area. I did want to touch on one other piece too, just to note that, well, it's not in the recommendations. We did note in the staff report because the proposed rezoning isn't triggering an OCP amendment. It's not proposing to amend the OCP. Therefore, I mean, it is viewed as consistent with the OCP land use designation. It is eligible for council to consider not holding a public hearing. While it is a more substantial change than the duplex application that council previously saw in a previous meeting, the Local Government Act doesn't make a distinction in terms of the scope of an application. It's just simply is a bylaw consistent with the OCP, and if it is, council can decide not to hold a public hearing. So that's certainly something that council consider.
And that's down the road at this point.
Yeah, it could be at this. It just needs to be done before first reading of a bylaw for this application.
I thought you said a public hearing. You mean a public information meeting?
No, a public hearing. So the council could decide not to hold a public hearing for this application.
Okay. Right. Okay. Good. Just a sec. You okay? Yeah. Okay. Councillor McLaughlin and then Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, through the chair. Is there any reason why you will not or cannot do a neighborhood plan in advance of this application? Is there any reason why? You have a community planner, you have a sustainability planner.
Yeah, okay, that's the question's been
wondering,
asked. Yeah.
Oh, I guess Andrew Allen could answer.
Mr. Allen, would you like?
Thank you. Our community planner and sustainability planner. I suppose would in fact be the same person who's largely carrying the weight on the short-term rental regulation outreach and planning at the moment. We do have a part-time policy planner who works in Vancouver, who is at home, who is prepping a foundation for the OCP review that we are looking forward to presenting to council in January, possibly at a committee of the whole, to let you know how we are planning and prepping and getting started. This is an area that would benefit from neighborhood plan, yes. We also have the Silverstone Heights just up Cowrie and Derby Road here, which is another area that would benefit from neighborhood plan.
So it's resourcing.
And budgeting and establishing priorities as directed by council, whether or not we proceed with development applications that come our way. Thank you.
So it's possible, I mean, it's possible, but it's a lot of resources
That's correct. We would likely seek consultant assistance for such planning.
Okay. Councillor Engstrom, we'll come back to Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, I know you were allowing latitude, Chair, but I don't think that's a fair question of our planner. I think that council needs to talk about those things in terms of resourcing, and I think it's putting them on the spot. So we really need to talk about these things in that area, maybe through the process that we're looking at doing in the spring strategic planning, because we can't ask staff regularly, can you do this? And you know, they can hear what we're saying, but I think it puts them on the spot. So, you know, I have some other questions, but on that one, it's a process issue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know, I understand you were moving the question through, but it just, it makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, that's why I asked the question. I'm not saying they have to. But also, it's a possibility perhaps that if there is an applicant here, a developer, that they may be willing to take a preliminary study, doing a draft neighborhood plan as a first step. And, you know, this is places I've worked before where landowners, developers, they all get together and do that. The major developers that want to go ahead, they usually pay for the service to have that done. But it's expected before they proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Toth, thanks. Yes.
Thank you. In going through the numerous reports that were attached to this one, I had some confusion around the drainage channels and the pond, both on this particular property as well as along that south side, that right of way that is potentially an extension of Marine, maybe someday, maybe. I was unable to establish from the report if they're looking to relocate that pond, or if they're just looking to delete the setback from that pond, or what the intention is there. It's a bit of a minor thing because it is a man-made pond, but you are also talking about building in proximity to the water. So it would be an interesting point of clarity. And then the other question that I had was also around the stormwater. Their stormwater plan utilizes the ditch on the west side of Reef Road as their point of collection.
Right.
But we've got active transportation work that we're going to be doing, you know, bike lanes and what have you. So are we even going to have a ditch there for them to tie into, I suppose is the question. Or are we going for built-up infrastructure here? Thanks.
I think that's well done. Yeah. Take it into account, I guess. Right. I don't expect an answer to that, right, at this point. You're just highlighting it as something.
There's a hand up there.
Oh, there is a hand up there.
I can speak to some of that. The applicant has done a lot of work on the environmental side of things, and we've had a number of meetings where they've been looking at all the different features on site, and there's a lot of artificial ponds and ditches on the site, and unfortunately, in working with their consultants, working with the province, they're very limited in what they can do. There's not, it was hoped that they could, potentially relocate some of that, add value to improve habitat in certain areas and remove some of the lesser valued habitat. But that's unfortunately not possible, at least as part of their last investigation. So they're kind of stuck with what's on the site and working around that. So that's where they'd be kind of looking at reduced setbacks rather than being able to relocate features and improve other features. So that's where a big chunk of the site is just them trying to work around what they have. And in terms of the Marine Way side of things, I mean, there is a portion of the creek that does come through the road right of way. So it's one of those areas like other areas where we have existing road rights of way where it's still to be determined whether or not we can feasibly construct a road within a portion of that, and what that would look like. So there's, again, that's sort of that piece of what, obviously there's an intent to have an east-west connection in that area. What that looks like, what the ultimate alignment is, still needs to be determined.
So that would be, for example, let's say we were to give permission to proceed, you might come back to us in a few months saying the whole thing's fallen apart because we don't have any way to get a road through. I mean, it's conceivable.
Potentially, or it'd be something where the solution would involve other properties that aren't involved in this application.
Right. Thanks. Yep. Councillor Shepherd.
It just seems there's so many unknowns with regard to transportation and on the environmental side. Even their own reports call for further studies to be done. So I'm just wondering if this is really the right time for the project to move ahead.
So that comes back to the point of what is permission to proceed. Questions that are, what would I say? Questions that maybe can be answered, to the positive or to the negative, to me are not reasons to stop the process, but clearly to express our concerns. As I agree, we need the access to that property to work. And if it's not going to work, I don't want to waste our staff's time. I suppose their priorities, would you, as staff, proceed with sort of the highest impediments first in dealing with this kind of project?
Yeah, good question. I mean, definitely the report does outline a number of the sort of servicing and access issues that need to be resolved, and that's things we would be working on as we work towards, developing bylaws and then for them to do further investigation. It's really just ensuring that council has endorsed us to continue that work, before we spend too much time working with the applicants without council having seen anything. And then, the whole idea of the permission to proceed is, again, to give council that early look, so we're not spending too much staff time or applicants' time on something that we might agree works, and then council has no interest in supporting. So it's not to say that there's not a lot of issues to be resolved, but it's really just we've spent time with the applicants, pre-application as well as during their application, and we want council to have an opportunity to give staff direction on whether or not they're willing to support us to continue.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Thank you, through the chair. I was just wondering, is there any history on this property in terms of ownership? I drove by there on the weekend and I didn't see any signs for redevelopment or anything. There's no sign of us even having anything to do with this property so far, which I guess is a good thing. But what is the history of the property? Because I think that the property next to it was part of a larger property as these, quarter sections and things are being subdivided. So I think it helps inform maybe ways we could plan with landowners because, they're waiting to jump to the next level, the next lot once they get one started. But I'd like to see us coordinate that a bit better. And I think by just understanding the history of it, perhaps we could they can contact the landowners and kind of help, provide more background, I guess. Also, in terms of the current zoning, how many units are permitted versus what would be perhaps proposed?
Through the chair, the OCP limits would allow for their originally proposed 45 units. So they were originally proposing 45, and then more recently, through further investigation, decided to change that down to 43. But 43 or 45, it still would be consistent with the OCP without triggering the need for an amendment. Just in terms of ownership, I mean, the current owners of this property are newer owners. I think they have looked at potentially trying to buy the property to the north without success. And then some of the larger lots to the west and south are all owned by a holding company, which for a long time I don't think the district had any engagement with. More recently, that owner, at least a few months ago, had hired a planning consultant firm, and we had some meetings with them, very early meetings.
Which is a report we have?
No, you don't have any reports on that. That was.
Wrong property.
Yeah, but
okay.
But again, there's several owners of these properties in this area, so it would, unlike the Sangera lands which Director Allen owned, which are owned by a singular entity, there's multiple owners in this location that we would have to try to coordinate for a larger.
Okay.
Just point of clarification, I asked a question about the zoning bylaw, not the OCP. Current zoning permits?
The current zoning on the property?
Oh, the current zoning is a rural zoning. But again, this is where that was sort of a carryover from the existing zoning bylaw 25 that also had a rural zoning on the property. And given the future development potential of these properties, we were looking at carrying that similar zoning forward, even though the OCP would allow for more units through rezoning.
But Mr. Hall, on page 113 of the report, we have the current zoning is R2, I believe, and where the proposal would take it to an R5.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at page 118, Councillor Toth is just
that would be one or two houses, maybe to 45 units.
Yeah.
For a lot that they paid, not much money.
Yeah. Anything else, Council? For me, I'd like to make sure we don't get too much in the weeds. I always look at these things and saying, is it something that can't possibly work? And in which case I'd be opposed. But I certainly support, the professionals that are involved. They know what they're doing, and so if they're willing to put money into it, it's not our job to tell them to stop spending money. It is our job to tell our staff to stop spending time if we feel that it's a waste of their time. Councillor Inkster, you have your microphone on.
Yeah, I keep looking through the documentation to look for aerial views of these properties. And I see some, but it's not clear to me, the black and white they were seeing. And it would be good if in future we could see them up here maybe and things like that, so I can get a view of the the surrounding properties, the transportation challenges that are, we're going to see a lot of, I take your point. Yeah, we're going to, there's two proposals in front of us tonight. By the way, even though the other ones are white, they look better than these other ones in the proposals. I like the look of those ones a little better, and sometimes when you have experience, you kind of go, oh, they were right, that would look better with this design. But anyway, transportation is an issue, so as has been mentioned, so I just wish I could get a clearer picture of it. I'm asking through to planning, I guess, is what, if we say yes to this, what does that mean to our commitments as the district? Because I've never actually received a request to go, I've never received a request to go forward before it comes to us as a proposal, right? And there's a number of steps involved, and
no, I agree with that.
And the unfortunate part about it is, as I remarked about the look of the buildings, we just haven't got there yet, where they're giving us some building looks that aren't really that. Do we want that look up there? But we're not getting enough information.
The look or the density? I think we're a long way from the.
Well, depending on the way they do it, density might be okay because we need affordable housing. But and that's what we've talked about. But it's just the look of that presentation. So where are we? What can we commit to?
So I think we're not. I asked a part of that question that we're not making a commitment other than we're saying we're willing to accept the costs of our staff spending time on this. you could be back in 2 weeks or 2 years saying it's not going to proceed.
Oh, okay, so.
Microphone.
Oh, sure.
If that's what we're asking then, earlier we asked, I had a concern with directing a question to a staff member, asking them to do this.
Mm-hmm.
If we say yes to this, just based on the fact that we're not sure where we would go, is that a proper, once again, resourcing through you? Because you have those considerations in mind as the top of the corporation. Are we resourcing our staff properly on this proposal if it has a number of issues beforehand?
Great. And I'm not sure how we assess that, or I'll make it personal. I'm not sure how I assess it. I look at this, again, the quality of the presentation. If somebody had come in and somehow got through staff to bring us the back of an envelope with a pencil drawing, I'd have a lot less confidence than I do with this one, where there's some serious commitment to proving if this project will work. And that's the risk that the applicant is taking on. So and your other comment, Councillor Inkster, about density and affordability rings loud for me. I'd rather we encourage people to test it, recognizing that we're not rubber stamping anything. It's still going to have to come back in the colors that you prefer. Yeah. Okay. But we've also identified some concerns with right-of-ways and riparian areas and practical ability to build roads. So we're not saying we're going to approve this. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. With that amount of riparian impact and the internal road network being proposed rather than trying to develop the extension of Marine Way, I am concerned that this property isn't going to be able to integrate with the environment around it. If at least at the density that's being proposed, it may very well just be too much for this property, at least without a wider conversation with the other neighbors. Because if they do come together to do an area plan, or even this property will dedicate this much, and these ones will dedicate other components towards that road network, then great. But I do have a lot of concerns around trying to integrate that density into this particular natural environment, basically a bog all around it. So.
Good, thank you. I think it's fair to say the applicant will watch and listen to this YouTube, this meeting on YouTube with very careful listening. They'd be kind of foolish not to. They're getting a flavor of what our concerns are, and they would need to address them if they wish to proceed. As it occurs to me, we could give them permission to proceed tonight, and then they listen to the YouTube video and go, we're not going back and carry on, which is their decision. Councillor Inkster, by the way, if it helps, there is a map, not zoomed out, but on 116, which does give some of the local neighborhood. But I agree on the screen, and in future is probably good. No PowerPoint though.
Yeah, so which one is it?
116.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Which property is that?
It's the lowest green one.
114 has it highlighted.
Yeah.
Which?
114 has it highlighted. Page 1.
I had to. Okay, Mr. Hall, yes, please.
Certainly, I can share my screen if you want to look at a map now, but we can incorporate that in future.
Yeah, I think it's more in future. Okay, so this is before us for, Councillor McLaughlin.
Right, I'm just going to speak against letting this proceed for the reasons I explained on Shoal, the water, and getting developers' hopes up. And also I'm concerned about the local community feeling like they're getting almost like development planning fatigue if they see a lot of these things happening very quickly with signs and participation. And I think it's premature. And as well, of course, I hate to lead the developer on because I really feel we do not have the water to spare. It's unfortunate. I wish we did, and I want to say that the applicant has, yes, put together a nice package, and yes, the planners have done very good reports with perhaps more graphics required on the broader scale. But I mean, we're just getting these things coming to us because basically we're an affordable place to build. Honestly, thanks.
Okay. Any other comments? I guess I would actually speak in the opposite side of that, Councillor McLaughlin. We need housing. We need housing. We need housing. We need affordable housing. We don't need giant single-family homes. I mean, if somebody wants to build it, that's their choice. But our community and our society needs housing that is truly affordable. And we need to get on with it because these won't be built tomorrow. We'll have the water solved long before we have these houses built. So, yes, Councillor Toth.
Maybe even before it comes back for first reading. Who knows?
Indeed, yes.
Sorry, that wasn't actually my original question. And I guess my question with going forward with the recommendations that are here would be how we can ensure that they are looking really carefully at trying to integrate with the natural environment, especially if they're talking about 43 units. You know, if they do their planning and they work towards 43 units and it comes back to us and it is absolutely not digestible because of, you know, whatever that needs to happen or can't happen, that's one thing. But if they can be strongly encouraged to look at lesser units to fit that natural environment better, I don't want to lead them on either, right? You know, in anything moving forward. And I'm concerned with trying to get 43 units into this property around this natural environment.
Good, yeah.
This is probably a very dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So this is it possible to go back and say that we need to add to the recommendations at this point? To say that there's something that you want to have or that we want in these recommendations, so we need to come back to the table to get to the first point where we do the first reading. Is that possible?
Okay, certainly there's a lot of work that would come before first reading.
Okay.
But if you wanted to propose something to add to these recommendations, I mean, procedurally, we can ask them to, you know, provide their input on anything, whether it's building around a bog or any other kind of changes. So that's a procedural response. Okay. If you have something, we'd certainly talk about it.
Well, I think certainly, Alton, you had, if you're able to frame the question, Councillor Toth has, if he's able to frame that question at this point. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but it sounds at this point that there is a question or two.
Yeah, thank you. And that's something too, in seeing these permission to proceed reports, even in the last term, there wasn't a lot of reason for pause at this early of a stage. We typically just went with the staff recommendations on the permission to proceed reports. And so process-wise, I'm a little unclear as well with this, if it would be appropriate to even, you know, I guess, yeah, I struggle with how to ask for that within the recommendations without unduly restricting the developer if they do come back and say, yes, we can do 43 units and this is how we will tie it in.
Right. Okay.
It could be a showstopper for me at first reading. So that's all. Willing to go with the majority on this.
Okay. You don't have a choice.
Exactly.
Councillor Inkster, I want to. Yeah.
So I'm assuming, based on the presentation of this report and the process that's been in place previously to this, is that we're just instructing staff to have further conversation with the proponent. The comments that have been presented at council by the council members should, most likely would, go into that conversation with the proponent based on the fact that the proponent, either watching this video and or hearing from staff, that the council has a minimum bar of acceptance. So if they want to proceed forward with not meeting many or any of our requests, then they're doing work that will be wasted. So that's what I'm assuming this request situation is for them to proceed based on the comments that staff have received.
So can I ask staff, would it make sense or would it be helpful to the process for us to table this and have you take these comments, take a YouTube link to this meeting and say, please consider these and tell us what more you want to provide before council considers permission to proceed? Mr.
If I may, I think that is, in essence, permission to proceed. Where we recognize we're not yet ready for bylaws,
right?
But there's work to be done with the applicants. And it is work. This is an application that's been made. We've received an application fee. It's above board, it's legitimate, but we're just not ready for bylaws. So I think tonight it's either council says, no, we don't like this, end of story, or sure, there's some potential, but we're just not ready for bylaws yet. And staff would agree, we're not ready for bylaws yet, but we're seeking direction. We have similar recommendations to Shoal Way respecting, we want to talk about rainwater harvesting, we want to talk about grey water reuse as part of your plans, do some investigation, and we want to talk about density and fit.
So actually, that's a significant comment. I think you're saying staff would like permission to proceed, because if you didn't, you wouldn't have it in front of us.
Correct.
Right. And that's something for us to keep in mind as well. I suggest Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just have concerns as well about the idea of the working with the community amenity and affordable housing amenity contribution, because what I'm finding is that we're always negotiating for more affordable housing, and then the density goes up, and then we're basically making a deal early on where we might find, in this case, because there are so many environmental factors, that we might want some other kind of amenity that's more related to park space or paths or who knows what. And again, that's sort of, if we commit to this, then again, we're on the density track. And, next thing you know, we might have an OCP amendment coming where they have even bigger ideas. So,
me, please.
Yeah, that's my concern here about that.
Thank you.
And it's in this recommendation, unfortunately.
The recommendation is that staff negotiate these things, not specifically that they would or wouldn't accept or propose something to us. So it's not a definitive statement, it's simply that they will negotiate at this stage. So, council, would anybody like to test the will of the council with a motion? Councillor Toth.
Throw it out there and see if it sticks. I'm willing to move the recommendations as presented on page 112.
Okay, great. And that's the second, Councillor Inkster? Okay, thank you. Any discussion, further discussion? No,
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm speaking in favor of asking more questions and staff having a discussion. I think staff's role in most cases is to work with proponents to present an appropriate plan to council for approval. So I'm okay with that, and it sounds like I've never seen this kind of proposal before in front of us, so I hope they have the resources when we say, go talk to them each time, right? I'm just, like I said to you earlier. But that having been said, I mean, there's a number of questions in here, and they could do all that work and come back, and somebody like me could say, there's a number of issues that we identified.
And that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's well accepted and understood. So, any further comments on the motion, Councillor McLaughlin?
I think if we table this item, the applicant can still do a lot of work and refine it. They know what our questions and concerns are. They might even do some consultation with First Nations and neighbors and things like that, which is not really part of our job. And then also, the planners, really, their job is not to really help with applications, but to go with the direction of council in this case, to decide whether we should proceed with encouraging it, or to rezone or not, or to OCP amend or not. And that's why we're here, to give them that direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? If not, I'll call the question, which is the recommendations as listed on page 112. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Shepherd and McLaughlin opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we did remove item 10.2, but my ever-present caretaker, Councillor Toth, has reminded me in item 8.3 we neglected to get the 3 readings. Actually, do the 3 readings.
Do we need the 3 readings?
I believe we do. We just endorsed the recommendation. Yes, Mr. Allen, please.
Thank you. Just point of clarification, this is an unusual, or pardon me, a new process for us. And upon reflection, I think best practice is to not do the readings tonight. We'd have to do the notification. There's some process steps to follow, but we did include the bylaw here. But upon reflecting on it more in the time since, I think it's best to know we can proceed without a public hearing, and we will activate the necessary notification steps as soon as possible, and then bring it back for readings at a future council meeting. Thank you.
So we don't need to do it.
Correct. Apologies for the confusion, but nonetheless.
Oh, good. All right, thank you. Council will move on then to, I believe, item 11.1, council reports. And I'll flip my magic coin and say, how about we go to Councillor McLaughlin first? Thank you. Then Councillor Inkster.
I had the pleasure of going to a development information meeting at the Shorncliffe 5535 Shorncliffe Avenue project. I saw some of our fellow councillors there early on in the process, and I did linger. I thought there was a presentation perhaps at 6:30, but because there actually were not any other people that came to that meeting, I don't know why it was in the paper. So it was very nice to talk to the applicant and to get to know, their enthusiasm for the project, to learn more about the project. But again, I live in the neighborhood and I am quite concerned about this particular site. It's a steep site that's bedrock, and it's behind Green Court and beside, some of our wonderful amenities that we have. And it's going to be quite disruptive to the community if it goes ahead. But again, my issue, although I do appreciate nice design and efforts and the enthusiasm brought by developers, my issue is water. It is water, and it is also the impact on the community. And the disheartening that I get, feelings I get from people that say, why are we going ahead with these developments when we don't have a sufficient water? I don't have an explanation for them, except that I try and bring up this point because I'm also concerned about that. So again,
okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's what I.
Yep. Councillor Inkster.
Very busy. Not a lot to report directly related to council duties, other than that I've been involved in a number of the festivities that come with the very busy Christmas atmosphere in Sechelt the last number of weeks, and including our quite a good staff party. So well attended and fun games, and kudos to the organizers from myself, and I'm sure through you, for which I believe you already recognized that night, but an additional piece, I think, to the wellness committee that puts things like that together, and they did a good job. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Oh, I didn't declare. We'll go Councillor Shepherd.
Just a meeting with the mayor and members of the Davis Bay Semla Park Community Association. They wanted to explain their capital requests that are in the 2023 budget, and get an update on where the Havie's development is going. That's what I participated in. Thank you.
Thank you for delaying your trip so you could be here today. Councillor Bell.
I was away for a week, so I did attend just recently the what did we call that? The drag queen party at the Raven Cry Theatre, and it was tremendous. Actually, it was put on by the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society. It was a tremendous event. It was packed. People of all ages there, but I think the best news is that $15,000 was raised for the society. So I'm very happy and pleased to hear that. I did, when I was away, I had a great trip in Ottawa. I got to see the Parliament buildings, and which I hadn't ever been to Ottawa, and attend the large Liberal party, and 2,000 people, and that was quite the scene. But it was a great time, and I enjoyed seeing the question period, which was quite interesting to see that quipping along. And so it was a great experience to be able to see the other side of government, and glad I went.
Great.
And thank you again, too. That was a fabulous party, staff party, to all of you. It was great. Really good to meet all the staff and at a closer level. And thank you. It was really well done. And I want to say something just about, to me, for somebody that's new, to me it says there's a really good culture in the District of Sechelt. I felt it. I feel it. To have the number of people that were there, I think speak worlds, because so many people wanted to be there, and it just feels really good. So well done as a team in terms of the culture of people that you're creating there. Happy people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Toth, anything to add?
I can't follow up on that. Thank you for taking all the words right out of my mouth, and given the time, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, well, I'll keep it brief as well. The last 2 weeks, I think Councillor Toth would agree, have been filled with pre-budget meetings, the SCRD, and of course here. We had a long session on Monday, and we're working towards concluding budgets earlier than ever, I think, this year. I want to thank the public for reaching out. I'm sure most of us have heard the comments about water. I'm happy to say that I expect there'll be some very big announcements in January about possible water supply solutions. We also have been working at the Community Safety Task Force. Councillor Rowe and I, we had another meeting. We'll have one early in January, where we'll invite a larger group of people because council has directed we must report back with our recommendations by the end of January. So we'll have some things to do there. And I was going to say I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Christmas party, but others have done it. So thank you for a fun time. Anything to report on the SCRD, Ms. Director Toth?
Not at this time.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned the water rates at the last meeting, and then we had that meeting. So, yeah, nothing really to report. The hot tub is open at the Aquatic Center, or should be open at the Aquatic Center, because, yeah, we are back to stage one. We are not off of restrictions entirely because staff wanted the tools in the toolbox to be able to take us back up again if the creek flows suddenly decline for whatever reason. But we are overboarding water at the dam right now at Chapman Lake. Edwards Lake still has a couple more meters to go to fill up. So I think I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, we're not out of the woods in terms of water.
With the amenities and back up and running of these facilities, because I couldn't find it anywhere. Let everyone know it's something we talked about.
Yeah. So communication. Yes. Yep. Good. Yes, and noted, and we will take that back. Yes. So, and we have.
When you're done.
I'm done.
You done. Well, I just wanted to say, my goodness, this is the last meeting before
Oh, no, we're
Happy
not,
Holidays.
hang on, you don't get to go there yet.
Oh, come on.
We've got some other
Come
business.
on. Oh, we're not done yet. Oh.
So, we'll move on, Councillor Bell, in your enthusiasm. You can take us through the correspondence page by page, if you would. We have 3 items, one from the SPCA for action. I must admit, in reading it, I wasn't clear what action, other than we love our pets and our animals and we want to protect them, and I'm not being flippant. For receipt, but the statement of for action, I would think there was to be something else, but I stand to be corrected. Can anybody help me?
No.
Okay, a motion to receive let's hold up, maybe we can motion to receive them all. Move, seconded, all in favor of receipt, carried. PD Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the last paragraph of the SPCA letter, they have asked if council would be interested in scheduling a presentation from them to hear about the services that they do provide. So that was the question that was up for consideration.
Thanks. Yeah, Councillor Inkster says yeah. Okay, all in favor of inviting the SPCA to come as a delegation to one of our meetings. Carried. The second one from somebody by the name of Patrick Weiler, our MP, is for our information. And I think so that's taken as we voted on receipt, so that's fine. And the third one is a reminder that we need to get our resolutions in for the ABICC meetings in April, with some deadlines there. So I think today it's about reminding those who've done these before and those who are new, this is an opportunity to put key things that maybe have kind of southwestern BC interest.
Never been heard before.
Yep. So, but the crafting of these is something if you have something you're particularly passionate about, I'd encourage you to craft something as a start, and then give it to our corporate office, and we can see if we can bring it back to for endorsement by the council before we send it off. Okay. And then we have one last bit of business, which is to release a resolution from in camera, which I always find amusing since we've released it by virtue of publishing the agenda publicly. So all in favor of the page 321, releasing this item from in camera. Move, seconded, all in favor, carried. And before those who wish, before you leave, you can. I want them back. So I want to thank staff. For some of us, it's new in the last couple of months. Oh, sorry. Here, I brought more. There you go. Don't forget. Somebody, come on, Lindsay, get up, take a picture. You, if you wish. Oh. No, thank you, everyone, and thanks to the public for sticking around. Those of you who are still here. I especially want to thank our Parks and Public Works people. And make a note, they are responsible for the roads in the district of Sechelt, which does not include the highway, which means it does not include Wharf from Dolphin to Toredo, and it does not include Toredo all the way out. So, and it's an early day and a long day for everybody there. So thanks to them. Thanks to the past council, except the one who's still here with us today. And especially thanks to our families who put up with all of us when we're reading 321-page agendas. So on that note, Merry Christmas to everybody, and I wish everybody well for 2023. And Merry Christmas to all, and to all a motion to adjourn and say good night.